Hi, I'm Marc, and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on European politics. And today we need to talk about the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine again. It is the most important topic in Europe at the moment. Around 3.5 weeks before the international agreement on grain exports from Ukraine expired, Russia again threatened to end the agreement. And meanwhile, at a meeting of the UN Security Council in New York, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov defended the war of aggression against the neighboring country that had begun 14 months ago. And the Kremlin announced that, as in the previous year, there will be no large international visitors at the traditional military parade on May 9th in Moscow. Terrorist attacks by the Kiev regime threaten a renewed extension of the grain deal after May 18th, is what the Russian Defense Ministry said on Tuesday night. Specifically, Russia, which itself launched the war of aggression against Ukraine in February 22, accuses the neighboring country of having used drones to attack the base of the Russian Black Sea Fleet on the Crimean Peninsula, annexed by Moscow in March and April. Initially, there was no reaction from Kiev on that bollocks. Russia has repeatedly threatened to scrap the grain agreement, which was last extended by 60 days in mid-March, albeit with different arguments. Moscow, for example, has recently repeatedly criticized that the agreed sanctions for its own fertilizer exports are not being sufficiently implemented. After the start of its war of aggression, Russia had blocked the neighboring country's Black Sea ports for months. As Ukraine is one of the largest agricultural exporters, fears grew of a massive increase in food prices and, as a result, a hunger crisis in the poorest countries. Last summer, the United Nations and Turkey brokered an end to the blockade in the form of the grain deal. According to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine is already preparing for the coming winter after months of Russian attacks on energy plants. We made decisions to restore the energy sector after the Russian attacks, Zelensky said in his evening video address on Monday after visiting the Zhytomyr region west of Kiev. Since last fall, Russia has repeatedly fired missiles and drones at Ukrainian power plants. As a result, there were repeated power and heating failures in many regions of Ukraine, especially during the cold season. Kiev has therefore repeatedly accused Moscow of energy terrorism. Russia's Foreign Minister Lavrov accused the West of hegemonic plans and defended his country's invasion of Ukraine. As I earlier mentioned at a UN Security Council meeting in New York, Lavrov claimed that the Ukraine question cannot be viewed in isolation from geopolitical developments, in which NATO has threatened Russia's security in the region for years. What a lot of bullcrap. The controversial meeting of the most powerful UN body was scheduled by Russia, given its presidency of the Council. In light of Russia's war of aggression, the session entitled Effective Multilateralism by Defending the Principles of the United Nations Charter was seen as a provocation by many countries. In the second year of the war, once again, no foreign heads of state or government were invited to the traditional military parade on May 9th on Red Square in Moscow. I gave a teaser on that, but now we'll talk about it. There were no special invitations this year. That was said by Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman. Only the president of the Central Asian ex-Soviet Republic of Kyrgyzstan, Sadir Shaparov, will take part in the celebrations, marking the 78th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory in World War II, because he will be in Moscow on a working visit anyway. At the same time, the Kremlin once again rejected suspicion that Russian President Vladimir Putin was being represented by doubles at public appearances. You've probably heard that Putin has many doubles who work for him while he's in the bunker. That's another lie, is what Peskov told young people at an educational event in Moscow. You see what kind of president we have. He was and is mega active. We who work with him can hardly keep up with him, he said. Speculations about one or even more Putin doubles keep coming up. Most recently, for example, in view of a visit by the Kremlin chief to Russian-occupied war zones in Ukraine. There is no known evidence that there is actually a double of Putin at any official appointments, though. But according to their own statements, the Kremlin intends to hold on to the presidential elections at the beginning of 2024, despite the ongoing war in Ukraine. The elections are taking place, is what Peskov said on Monday, according to the Interfax news agency. President Vladimir Putin made his position clear in his State of the Nation address in February already. Nevertheless, speculation about a postponement or cancellation of the election spread, also due to statements by officials. Ella Pamfilova, for example, has accused the West of sabotaging the presidential election. Huge sums of money have been raised for this by Western countries, especially the United States, said Pamfilova on Monday at an appearance at a university in the far east Russian city of Khabarovsk. Petrov reiterated Pamfilova's allegations, and they said the pressure would increase under the conditions of the special military operation. Yeah, that's what Moscow calls the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine still. Nevertheless, he was convinced that the vote will take place. After a constitutional amendment in 2021, the previous terms of office of Vladimir Putin, who was elected president for the first time in 2000, will no longer be counted. This means that he can run again in 2024 and theoretically also in the 2030 elections. Observers have cited Putin's falling popularity ratings in Russia as one reason for the start of the war against Ukraine. In 2014, the Kremlin chief was able to spark national euphoria with the annexation of the Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea, which also favored his re-election in 2018. And so you see that all this warmongering is more for their inner politics and keeping their power than anything else. But nevertheless, it is going on, and we will definitely talk about it even more. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.